All right, welcome back to Drumset Instruction for Music Educators. Today's lesson, we're going to look at really the history and the beginnings of what I would call the art form of drum set playing. And again, I refer to my mentor and instructor, Jim Chapin, and he in turn, if he was here, would say, I want to introduce you to my mentor and my instructor, and that is what you're seeing here on the left. This book, which is referred to by its title these days as the Moeller Book, was originally called The Art of Snare Drumming. And when Sanford Augustus Moeller wrote this book, and it was released in 1926, it really was the first document of its kind to not only focus in on snare drumming from a musical creative standpoint. It went much further than that as far as laying out an explanation of what the Army had done during the Civil War to train its drummer boys and get them prepared so that both the armies of the Union and the armies of the Confederacy could move in a much more expedited factor. The one thing that's so unique about American music, and it really can't be emphasized enough, is that the tragedy that was the Civil War, the great, incredible tragedy and hypocrisy, which was slavery, which existed in the first 60 years of our nation, and our nation was founded on this idea that all men are created equal, and in fact, of course, that was just a Hippocratic or a hypocrisy. Which is of the largest order that there's ever been. Well, out of that hypocrisy and out of that great Civil War, you had an explosion of music, and then you also had a country and a society that really had to look within itself and completely reevaluate what it was going to be as a nation. And out of that reevaluation, you had a completely new art form, a musical art form that went on to be known as jazz in the beginning of the 20th century, but really had its roots back into the 19th century. And part of the roots of jazz is the drums and the drum set evolution. So what Moeller wanted to do with this book was not only document and make a book that would, or write a book, I should say, that would give drummers a handbook on how to gather technique, a handbook on what exactly they need to learn, but he also gave them documentation exactly on how to do it. So, for example, if we look at the book, notice here on the left, I'll focus in on this. I'll move in on this a little bit. It's going to be difficult to see, but what you're looking at here are photos of, in fact, Sanford Augustus Moeller, and it shows multiple pictures of him. If you start in the top left-hand corner, notice that his hands, every photograph, his hands are moving a little bit differently. They're moving from an upstroke to a downstroke, downstroke to an upstroke. And so he was concerned even, back in 1926 about technique. Well, where exactly that technique started, and this is what this lesson is going to be about. We'll go into the history of the drum set. We'll go into more detail on that later, but I want to start right here with this line of music. Notice 4 quarter notes stems up, 4 quarter notes stems down. Now, what you'll find if you go through the drum set literature, if you go through all drum literature, and as music educators, when you were in college and so forth, if you're a sax player or trumpet player, you somewhere along the line had a drum class, because everybody thinks that playing drums is easy, so you grab the drumsticks and you just start banging away. Well, it's not always that simple. And if you were so inclined to take it a little bit seriously, this is where the Union Army's drum manual starts, with 4 left hands, 4 right hands. And you would practice 4 lefts, 4 rights for hours at a time. And then where would you go from 4? Then you would go to 3. 3 lefts, 3 rights. 3 lefts, 3 rights. And then where would you go? Well, turn the page, and you can guess where we're going to go. 2 lefts, 2 rights. 2 lefts, 2 rights. And then from there, single notes. So this idea of 4, 3, 2, 1 was the basic premise of how all drummers that were in both the Union Army and the Confederate Army started out. And Sanford Augustus Moeller was extremely interested in this. He wanted to know how it was possible that young boys, 10, 11, and 12 years old, could play drums for hours and hours and hours, mile upon mile, and not get tired. You know, it wasn't like somebody could ride up to General Lee or General Grant and say, sir, the Army has to stop, the drummers are tired. That simply wasn't going to happen. One thing that's very important, when you look at this picture, notice how their accents are on the second note. Remember that, because in a few lessons from now, we're going to talk about why the second note of the stroke is accented. But here's something else that's very important. This book was written in 1926. Let's move to the 30s. Let's move to the most used, probably, if it's not the best-selling book of all time, it probably is close. This is George Lawrence Stone's Stick Control. And I'm sorry, I don't have the cover anymore. My cover fell off. This book that you're looking at right now is probably about 45 years old. And what you need to notice about this is that when we look at this book, you're going to see that the stickings are just the same as Stone's. Notice that first, look at the top line. Right, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, and then line 2, left, right, left, right, left, right, left, right. But look to the right side. 4 rights, 4 lefts. 4 rights, 4 lefts. And then for the rest of this page, of which there are 24 exercises, you're going to see 24 different versions of right, left, right, left. You're going to see 2 rights, 2 lefts, 2 rights, 2 lefts, and then you're going to see 2 lefts, 2 rights, 2 lefts, 2 rights. And then look at line number 5, please. Line number 5 is a critical sticking for drummers. Right, left, right, right, left, right, left, left. Now in drum nomenclature, we call that a paradiddle. For drummers that make a living behind the drum set, that's a real world sticking. Alright, so now, let's continue. The next book I'm going to show you was written 2 years later. Stick Control was written in 1935. This book that we're showing you now, Haskell W. Haar's book, was written in 1937, first published in 1937. Let's look over here to this page, and look what you're going to see. Look at this. 4 rights, 4 lefts. 4 rights, 4 lefts. Then, you look over there, 3 rights, 3 lefts, 3 rights, 3 lefts. And back it up here just a touch. Then, 2 rights, 2 lefts, 2 rights, 2 lefts, and then single strokes. This idea of 4, 3, 2, 1 was in Haskell Haar's book. The Haskell Haar drum method, another of the most widely used books in drum history. This book has been around since 1937. The one thing that I told you in the first video is that I'm not trying to reinvent the wheel. What I am trying to do is to give you a definitive way to teach your students that don't have access to drum set teaching and education in the areas which you live, to give them something that they can use. This is where it all begins. This is what I call the first six. And what I do is use the very ideas that we just showed you in these three different books. When you look at this sheet of music that I've written, and I have to tell you that I showed Mr. Chapin this page I wrote about 3 months before he passed away. And he was very excited about it because he said that this cut to the heart of what it takes to become an independent drum set player, to have control over all the instruments. I'll explain that further in a moment. But what I want you to do, let me focus in on the titles of these exercises. Notice that the first title says right. The second one says left. The third one says hands. The fourth line says feet. The fifth line says cymbals. The sixth line says drums. But let's look at the actual music. Look at these rhythms. Notice that they're simply quarter notes. Simple quarter notes. But notice, if you look closer, that the second beat and the fourth beat has 4 notes played on all of those exercises. Alright, so now let's be specific about what we're looking at here. A lot of times, you know, the old joke is what do you call a person who hangs around a musician? A drummer. Well, why is that? Well, drummers aren't real musicians. They don't have real music, and they don't really know what they're doing. Well, we all know that that's not true. And when you look at this page of music, what you need to understand is that this X with the stem going up is the right hand playing on the ride cymbal. This note, quarter note, with the stem going down on the first space is the bass drum played with the right foot. When we go to the second line, we see the third space, quarter note, stem up, is the left hand played on the snare drum. When we see the X stem going down, that is the hi-hat played with the left foot, pedaled with the left foot, not played with a stick, pedaled with the left foot. These 4 notes, ride cymbal, bass drum, snare drum, left foot, make up the 4 voices on these exercises. Alright, I'm going to shift over here now on the camera, and I'm going to take you through these exercises so that you'll be able to see and understand what we're trying to accomplish here.